So, hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. And I have this wonderful panel with me to talk to, and I'm delighted to see so many of you here. So, we're going to talk about making change, and we're going to talk about women making change, something that my three panelists symbolize in their lives and their work. Before I ask them to actually tell their stories to you, I just want to introduce the subject. So, really speaking, women in this country have been in the forefront of making change for the longest time. And if we just look at our recent recorded history, we look at even from the moment of independence onwards, we see women in every sector working hard to bring about this change. Except that you have to look really hard to see them, because most of their contributions are not recorded. And if you actually look at where the women come from, the lack of opportunity that they face, the challenges and difficulties that they face at the very start, and how, given half a chance, given a small opportunity, they will grab it and do their best to fight the most difficult of odds to actually provide a winning combination of something that combines the personal and the political, something that brings about a change, something that changes them and changes the environment around them. And these are the stories that we are going to hear from these women of how they've made change in their personal and professional and political lives. So I have with me three amazing women like that. I'm going to start by asking Chetna, who is here. Chetna and I have known each other for, I think, 40 years or more. We have both been involved in the women's movement in this country. And Chetna was one of the people who was the documentalist who wrote the history of a very, very important land rights movement in our country that was called the Bodh Gaya movement. And that was a movement inspired and led by a leader some of you may have heard of, called Jaipur Narayan. And it was a movement that involved a lot of students, men and women. And at the end of the movement, when the students were able to take land, so it was a movement for the fair distribution of land, and against the huge sort of tracts of land that were owned by not only the zamindars but also religious organizations. So in this case, the organization that was targeted was a mutt, a religious organization which owned some 12,000 acres of land. And the movement was able to take from the mutt 5,000 acres. But the issues arose when that land was to be distributed among those who fought for it, because the fighting was done by men and women together, but when it came to distributing the land, it was assumed that the title deeds would go only to men, and the women fought. And Chetna is one of the people who gave us that history of the internal struggles and the battles that women fought, but she has gone on to do very much more in her life, and I'm going to ask her to talk about it. So Chetna, aapne jo kiya, I mean, you actually moved from being somebody in an urban setup to the village, and you started to work there. So can you describe your journey of change to us?
Thanks. So Urvashi, yes, we are meeting after so long, number one. But also I'm also realizing that this whole property rights and land rights movement, at that time I was in Mumbai. I got in this movement as a student. I was an undergraduate program, so I have not even graduated. But I was in Bihar and struggling for the land rights for women. And the courage I saw in these women about asking the rights and ownership in my name was amazing, Urvashi. That gave me I want to do something. And so in passion of this work, I traveled all over India with Jayaprakash Narayan, who was moving the villages of India, all over the campuses, and appealing the student that India resides in villages, and I want young students to work in those villages. So I thought, I'm done with Mumbai. I want to go, and I decided to leave Mumbai and shift to the village. And I traveled with Jayaprakash Narayan of the countryside of India, all over India. And then when I was traveling, I met my husband Vijay, who is a farmer, fell madly in love with him, decided to marry him. After listening that, my family was devastated. And I'm talking about 84, 85. Because he had no higher education, but he was a charismatic leader with the farmers. And I said, but I have decided. And I said, I've decided not only to marry him, but I've decided to leave Mumbai also. So I left Bombay and shifted to the Maswad village, where there was no running water, no electricity, no transportation. But one thing was there, and that was the women there I found was they had no travel, no degree, no education, but they were ordinary women which had extraordinary courage. Every day they would tell me something. One day, one woman with Parvati Kantabai, she came to me and she said that, you know, I'm working whole day, I have my business on the street and I want to do savings. My obvious response to her was that, do you even have a money to save? She was insistent. She said that I earn my daily wages, daily work. I do a business of blacksmith. I work and I want to buy a tarpaulin sheet because I'm staying with my children on the street. And I want a shelter in summer and monsoon. So I want to buy a tarpaulin sheet. So I said, if you want to save, you go to the banks. I went with Parvati, with Kantabai to different banks. The bank said that we cannot open the account. You know why? Because they want to save 3 rupees, 5 rupees a day, they are not an affordable client to us. So I said, okay, we cannot start the bank. We cannot open the account. But then the movement part in me, Urvashi, as we were at that time, we said, why not start a bank for women like Kantabai? And then we decided to set up the bank. And we applied for the banking license. And we were very excited. We had no idea how are we going to be treated by the Reserve Bank of India. As our proposal goes, we get the answer from Reserve Bank. We cannot issue a license to the bank whose promoting members are non-literate. I was devastated. I came back, I was crying. I told our women that we will not get the license because our women are not educated. You know what our women said? They said, we are not asking for money, number one. We are not asking for grant, number two. We are not asking for subsidy. What we are asking is a safe place to save, and that is our right. And they said that we cannot read and write, but we will learn to read and write. And our literacy classes started. And these women, then I decided that we'll go again, but I will not go alone. With me, these women will come to the Reserve Bank of India. After 5 months of the literacy classes, they were so excited to study, to read and write after their working days. When we applied again for the banking license, they accompanied me to the Reserve Bank of India. You know what they said? They met the director of Reserve Bank and they said, we cannot read and write, but we can count. Right? Applaud for those women, right? And they challenged the officer. Ask us to calculate the interest of any principal amount. If we fail, don't issue the license. But tell your officers to do it without calculator and see who can calculate faster. Right? Needless to say, we got the banking license. I have specially come with this.
So, Chetna, thank you. I'm going to move to Kanta because I want to get everybody's stories. And Chetna's story also is told in, as my young colleagues would say, a heckin' passionate way in a TED Talk that she did, which you can actually access on YouTube. Let me turn to you, Kanta. So your journey was a little bit opposite of Chetna's. that you didn't chase some man you fell in love with. You were not chasing Jayaprakash Narayan, but you were trying to get away from being married off, and you were trying to look for a job, or you had these thoughts. So can you tell us about how you came into this?
Thank you, Urvashi ji. Good afternoon, everyone. Absolutely right. My story is completely opposite. I was dying to go out of the village because I had nothing to lose there by leaving the village. And from the early childhood, I remember three things clearly. I wasn't who I was. In my head, I was somebody else. So some pagalpan was definitely there because I used to think that, and village mein everybody used to call me Saab Bahadur because I had answers to everything, all general knowledge questions, because I used to do something different other than studies, and that kida still stays with me. That was number one thing I remember. Second is my dreams were completely different from my brothers sisters in the same household. I used to think of aeroplanes. I used to think of I don't know what, which were never. We used to share dreams in the morning. Mine were completely different. People used to think I'm wonky and I have gone crazy or something. Third thing that I distinctly remember is that where I was living, that's not my world. I belong somewhere else. And that just to take that village journey to where I am today, one thing has stayed, the restlessness. I'm still restless because this is not the final thing that I'm doing. I think it is going to go somewhere else. It's been very interesting journey. Why I say interesting is that I don't remember a single instance, and I'm very, very genuine about it, when I felt disheartened saying I'm going to leave it and it's not going to work out. I have never slept thinking that it's never going to work out. That is another trait that probably I had from the childhood. So I did sports and I did very well in studies. That gave me scholarship, that took me to the world-class university that I studied in, continued playing and doing well with boys, all the boys and single girl in the class. But then got married early and to an army officer, and seriously didn't know that there will be a way out because UN was in my blood. In my head, I was a big staff of UN. But there was no way a person like me studying in a village school can reach UN. But because of that restlessness, I started working with women's organizations when my husband went to a field location. And today, when I reached UN on 9th July 2009, I seriously promised myself that everything that I do thereafter will be for women and girls who really need to dream big, who need to think. So it's been very interesting, sports, and one more thing that for young women who are sitting here, do whatever you're doing, but do something extra that can set you apart from girls of your age and your level. Every year I go on a learning trip for 10 days to 3 months, whatever my office allows me time, and office has been really supportive. I go on a learning trip that helps me understand better, unlearn some of the wrong things that I'm doing, and expand my network. And I think that's what makes my life more interesting.
But can you fill in a little blank, just quickly, which is that you started working with a women's organization, but you were not yourself in any way. It was just a job. But that job transformed your life through the work you did with women. Can you talk a little about that?
So my basic restlessness when I got married was that I had to ask somebody for money. I studied on scholarship, and my husband will treat me like a wife, and I got hurt every time he asked me to do something.
Make chai, for example.
Chai bana do. And I said, do you know who I am? And he said, yeah, I know. You are my wife. And I said, then how can you order me around like this? And he wasn't ordering at all. He was just in a normal way, but I really used to feel that I am much bigger than him in my head, but my reality said something else. But then slowly it sunk in, Urvashi, that I need to do something to change my situation. And that was to earn my own money. And that was a major differentiator. And I started earning my own money. But I'm saying it was a job, but I was seeking more from that job. And that's how probably started with money motivation, but I found my home in women's movement, You were so big that time. I remember reading Kali for books and many books that they were publishing. Kamla Basin, all these people, and I have goosebumps because because every day you learn something else which you didn't know earlier, and say these women, all these women have created their own path. What is the problem with me? Why shouldn't I do this? So that is how it all, the learning kida started again, and I started learning from there. But again, I drive my passion, my work, my motivation from women who I work with. And
So
every
in
day
your
is a
head, you have made it to where you want to be.
Yeah.
Yes, almost.
I have no dream for myself.
Yeah.
Trust me, there are not many people who can say all my dreams are achieved. Mine have been.
Okay,
So-
great.
so-
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So let me turn to our youngest member, Harini. So your path is actually quite different, and each one of you has a different path. You are a journalist, you've been a journalist, and through your journalism, which is on sports, you have discovered the stories of women, and you also have, through your own experience, understood how to open up that pathway for other women, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here and to be seating with change makers like y'all. Quite inspiring. And by the way, to all GLF people, this is my bucket list. So yeah, it's a huge moment. Thank you, UN India, for giving me this opportunity, and JLF as well. I think briefly, if I speak about, I was also one of the teenagers who was very clear that I don't want to be an engineer or a doctor. And I come from Mumbai, from a Gujarati household, where the norm was, aap ya to engineer ban jao, ya to doctor ban jao, and that's been my family tree. I was clear that I wanted to be something different. Sport was a passion for me. I used to enjoy like getting up at, when I was a kid, studying in school, I used to still get up at like 3 a.m. to watch a cricket match happening in West Indies. But did I think that I will make it there? No. I was fascinated by being a commercial pilot, but you know, it's quite expensive at that point of time in India. So as you know, maybe look at the opportunity from the situation that I was in, I decided, okay, let me take up mass media. And that's how my journey began into sport. But what changed me was I used to always think that if I wanted to be contribute to the sports field, I had to play. I didn't have the exposure at that early stage that there could be a pathway, that beyond sport also you can make a mark. For me, a trip that sort of changed my life was the 1999 Cricket World Cup, which happened in England. And my spiritual mentor, he actually knew that I was interested in sport, and he encouraged my parents that, you know, it's a summer vacation, why don't you send her to see the World Cup? And that's when actually, as a kid, somebody was with me, giving me a tour of the Lord's cricket ground, telling me that, you know, this is where the journalists sit, this is how the event gets organized. And that's the first time I realized that, hey, there is a scope for me to get involved into this. And little did I know, I mean, for me, I was a teenager going on my first trip overseas, enjoyed watching India at the World Cup. It's a dream come true. But a few years later, when I see that, okay, I had to make a choice, and it turned out to be that I leaned on that experience and that exposure. So if I wouldn't have got that exposure, I don't know if I would have been here, because that exposure led me to making that choice of being a journalist. And things just moved on. And for me, money was a differentiator. So I actually started working in first year of my college. Thankfully, I got opportunities as a freelancer. And when I began, it was pretty much one girl. Up until 5 years ago, it was one girl and say 50 guys. I'm not proud of this, but I was in Australia, and there was a front page of the Herald Sun which covered an article saying that amongst 50 touring sports journalists covering a bilateral tour of India and Australia, I was the only girl on that. And reading that, you know, the former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard's office actually called me, and I was featured on ABC. It's not something that I am happy about, because ideally we should have more women representation, which is happening now. But I think what, as I mentioned, as you sort of questioned, like, you know, in terms of how am I looking to sort of unearth more stories, we all agree in terms of cricket is the #1 sport in our country in terms of sponsorship, in terms of the viewership that it gets. We've got a platform now in Women's Premier League where girls are also getting opportunities. But at the same time, the country that we are now with our performance at Olympics, a lot of things are changing. So I take it as my responsibility that even if it does not make it to a national television channel, at least use your own platform to amplify those stories, because everybody gets inspired by everything. Everyone's looking for that motivation. You don't know how one story can change someone's life, because I strongly believe that universe is made up of stories and not atoms. So that's what my journey has been, pretty humbling. Yes, I've covered 5 World Cups, Olympic Games. That's given me an exposure, but more than that, it's given me values, because of which I think I've been able to sustain myself, and there is no shortcut to hard work. I mean, you have to do your own way, you have to find your own paths. And despite being the only girl in this industry, you face challenges, but I think those challenges are also opportunities to find your own path and just sharpen yourself and become better as an individual.
Thank you. Thank you. So now, all of you have spoken in one way or the other about the certain opportunities that opened up for you, that led you on the path that you finally took. And you've also spoken about some of the challenges that there were. In your own work now, are you able to open up those opportunities for other women? I mean, Kanta, do you want to go first and respond to that?
Yes. So I take it in 3 different ways. One is that if somebody in my place is sitting, if I wasn't there, what would I expect that person to do? And I'm doing exactly that I'm not missing any chance that I expected a deputy representative of UN Women to do. So, and I'm not leaving it for tomorrow. That if tomorrow comes, maybe I'll do it tomorrow, not today. So I'm in my control and my resources and my circumstances. Whatever I thought should be done, I'm doing that. That's one way of doing things. Secondly, I'm connected to thousands of young women in more ways than one. I don't remember a single LinkedIn message that I haven't responded to. If anybody here has reached out to me on LinkedIn, would vouch for it that I respond to the person, because many young women write to me saying, I want to work with women. And as a UN staff, it's my responsibility, and I'm saying it with great humility, my responsibility to create a name for UN and let it stay there, that this is an organization which is impartial, which is there to stay, which is people's organization. It is as much as yours as it is mine. So it is my duty to maintain that if I can't further that. So I positively respond to young women and tell them there's nobody who can stop you. Don't listen to anybody who's telling you that you can't do this. Number 2. The third way is that in my work, because I have also come from civil society organizations, I use utmost honesty in my word, in my action, and in my conduct, so that nobody loses faith in women's organizations, in movement, that it is required. So this is how I'm doing it. Of course, everything else is job. But this is beyond job that I'm trying to establish in my way of working. And I think, and of course I can't say I'm changing the lives. All I'm saying is that the way I think should I respond, I think that's what I'm doing, and very honestly, very, very honestly.
Okay, so I'm sorry, people were wanting to applaud and I stopped them by speaking. What you're also saying, and Chetna, I want you to respond to this, and I want you to respond to the question I asked, but also what comes out of what Kanta is saying, which is that as a woman in a leadership position, what you are doing is taking the responsibility of opening up opportunities for other women very much to heart. You're taking it as part of your work. Why then do women in leadership often get accused of being anti-women? Because people say when women take power, they turn against other women, as if men don't. But that doesn't get commented on. That's seen as normal, that men will take power and turn against other men, it's okay. But when women do it, it's seen like some terrible exception and some betrayal. So Chetna, aap bataiye, what do you think? Why is this said, and is this true in your experience?
So before I say why is it said, I would just say what my experience is. And I'm also very thankful that I'm here today, thanks to Jaipur Lit Festival and thanks to Kanta and thanks to Urvashi. So actually, one thing with me, what has happened is that I always felt that it's not that I am working for women. It has always worked out that I've learned so much from these women. who have never been, like, got an opportunity to learn. And what did I learn? Yeah, that was. So actually, I saw that when after staying in the village, setting up the bank, every time women have solutions and they come forward. And I will narrate another story. Very briefly, I'll do that. This is Kerabai. She is actually rearing sheep and goat, doing little bit of farming. And she comes and she says, there is such a bad drought, you are not doing it, I'm mortgaging gold, I'm taking loan. Find some solutions. We started cattle camp. But to give hopes to farmers, she started singing. And she was such a great singer. She never went to the school. And we started radio. I'm just to all of you to see also that how when these women, they run the radio, how are they, these women have never been to the school, but they are running the radio. When you have such women around you, and Urvashi, I also feel that, you know, ये जो बात होती है कि महिलाएं महिलाओं के खिलाफ होती हैं, मुझे बहुत बार ऐसा लगता है कि हमको एक तरीके से किसी को मुंह बंद करना है ना, या हर चीज़ को बहुत मजाक उड़ाना है. जब हम लोग बैंक भी शुरू कर रहे थे तो सब लोग चिढ़ा रहे थे, कचरा बैंक शुरू करोगी क्या, औरतें तो कचरा साफ करती हैं, आप कचरा बैंक शुरू करेंगे. औरतें जब भी आगे आती हैं तो ऐसी बातें होती हैं, मर्द आगे आते हैं तो ऐसी बातें नहीं होती हैं. और दूसरा मैं ये कहना चाहूँगी कि जब ये बातें औरतों के बारे में कही जाती हैं, मैं ये भी कहना चाहूँगी कि ये भी बात उतनी ही ज़रूरी है कि जिम्मेवारियाँ औरतों की हैं. ये बता देना कि ये बिल्कुल गलत है और वो एक्शन से बताना. तो मैं जब एक्शन से बताना, तो मैं यहाँ ये कहना चाहूँगी कि जब हम लोग बैंक शुरू किए तो हमने महिलाओं को बचत की, महिलाओं को लिए कर्ज हुआ. लेकिन ये कांता केराबाई जैसी औरतें क्लाइमेट चेंज के बारे में बात करती हैं, किसानों के सवाल पे बात करती हैं, और हम लोगों ने कहा कि हम मर्दों के डिपॉजिट लेंगे, सुरक्षित रखेंगे, और औरतें लोन लेगी, लेकिन मर्दों को भी ये सुविधा देंगे. और उसी के साथ मैं ये जो प्रॉपर्टी राइट्स की बात है.
अच्छा, अब ना आप इतना लंबा बोल रही हैं, हिंदी में थोड़ा सा अंग्रेजी में भी कह दीजिए. हाँ, ताकि
What I'm trying to say is that it's very important that how you address the issue. So I'm just saying that we give savings credit, but we also give savings to men also. It's an opportunity for a man that if they come in with us, not only we will get equality, but you will also be a better human being and you will be more dignified, right? So I think that is the whole approach. And at the end, I would say, even in that, we have a product for property rights, where women get rebate in interest if they own property. And I say, Urvashi, we got thousands of men who came forward and they said, we would like to share the property with our wives if we are getting rebate in interest. So I think you have to address the issues differently.
Yeah, and thank you for really pointing that out. If I can ask you, Chetna, before you put the mic down, you know that small bit when you talked about the kachra thing, the kind of accusation, you said that in Hindi. I'm not sure everybody in the audience understands Hindi, so can you just tell that little story?
So you know what happens generally in the villages, if women come forward and they want to do something very new and something very different, men make a fun of them and make a fun to reduce the confidence, right? So women, they clean the house. So then men said that, what are you talking about the bank? You are going to make a bank of dustbin. So then women were like, we are talking about savings, right? So then when we had our new building of bank, our women said that everyone was teasing us that you are going to make a bank of dustbin, but now men are also coming here and doing deposit, and we are one of the best institutions.
Thank you. That story was important. I wanted you to tell it. So, Harini, what about you? Because you carry the self-given responsibility, because I don't think anybody's asking you to do this, but you seem to be doing it on your own, which is understanding that so many young women want to enter this field and thinking of them. So can you talk a little bit about sort of things that you do to open those possibilities?
Absolutely. I think where I come from, right, I still believe that if I had a mentor, maybe my journey could have been slightly different, even though I have zero regrets where I am. But I think it's important to have a mentor. When I came in, we didn't have a person who we could go to understand that what are the different areas. Like when I was doing mass media, we had people who told us broadly, ki, okay, there is journalism that happens, but what exactly happens in journalism, what exactly happens in terms of the trajectory that you can take or the options that you have available, which now obviously it's pretty open, accessible, it's easy to connect with anybody, even an Instagram DM gets you response from people. So I think that ways my journey was not the easiest, but not all journeys are meant to be easy. But I, as a person in this position, think that it's my responsibility and duty that if I've reached at this level, at least the journey for the next generation should be easy and not as tougher. Because I think we all deserve to have a simple sort of pathway and a route to success. So I make it a point at myself, at my level, where, I align with individuals who have the same vision, like-minded people, and obviously platform like United Women with Generation Equality program that they've organized. That gives me an opportunity to amplify more such voices and stories of individual, which I think is important for people to know. And also everybody here, if there's anyone who wants to sort of know more about sports, media, journalism, more than happy to help. But that's where I feel that, I've done certain camps in rural India, which is places like Rani Khet, where I've actually gone and spent about 10 days. And it was very an experiment that we took a lot of sports gear for them, which was pretty basic. The endurance level of kids in the hilly region is very good. So we thought let's sort of bunch of friends went there, channelize their energy. So we took a lot of training pants, t-shirts, football, basketball, easy sort of things for them to know. And the girls were just like looking at it and they were like, can we also take this? So for me, it was quite sort of not something that I expected, because I come from Mumbai and things are pretty normal there, and but that's the reality of our country, right? As ma'am said, that India is made in villages, and we actually spent about 10 days. The girls had never even thought, the question that I was asked is, can we actually compete with guys? Can we actually play with this guys or boys in our class? We actually sort of did a crash course training for them in terms of basics of football, basics of basketball, and we eventually had a match between the boys and the girls, and they just sort of, it was a fun evening or an afternoon, but they took back so many lessons on the field. They had bragging rights, like, okay, we beat the guys. And that confidence in them, I'm still in touch with them. So there are moments or initiatives that I undertake at a very personal level, because I feel that, in whichever capacity that you can give back, it's your responsibility to do that. And that's where I come from.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have a general question, which any or all of you can choose to answer briefly, and then we'll open it up, because we'll take about 12 minutes or so for questions. My general question to you is, it's wonderful that you are making this change in your own lives, and that it's broader than just your own lives. Do you ever despair? And if you do despair, what is it that gives you the courage to go on? Anyone can choose to answer it, whichever sequence.
What bothers me the most even today, and sometimes I feel helpless about, is the violence against women. I don't know how can a society in 2024 can continue to normalize violence in public spaces, at home, in cyberspace. I mean, I'm appalled by that and feel very, very sad about it, that we are not able to do much. That makes me feel whether we need to do a public movement. I don't know what we need to do, but this is completely unacceptable. Also not fair for women, because it impedes their work. It also they lose confidence because they are facing violence. The worst part is that if it happens to one woman, 10 others either leave school or college or work. So it is not just confined to that particular woman. It impacts everybody else around her. And it makes her feel helpless again. So I'm that is something that bothers me. Also, what is happening around the world in terms of war. And you were talking about women are women's enemy. No, men are men's enemies because they are destroying the world. Women are not destroying the world. They know how to create and you कहते हैं संजोना जानती हैं वो तोड़ना नहीं जानती हैं. तो मुझे नहीं कभी accept होता ये बात. So that bothers me though.
You know, one thing when I have despair, one thing I've seen in my experience of 3 decades of working with these wise women, and what I feel, and it is like even today, that there's so much of wisdom with these women in the villages, right? And they talk about so much wise things, and the despair is, Urvashi, that we fail to listen them. We fail to listen them at every level. Like even the regulators, policymakers, I'm not saying government, I'm saying like, you know, in our bank, in our organization, while running the radio, even today when one woman like Kirabai would say that, I want to become a radio jockey, the manager who is sitting there, she would say like, do you know to read and write? This lady, without even studying, she can make poems. We fail to understand that wisdom, and I feel I'm disappointed. But at the same time, I see that if they get stage, you know, they can make wonders, and that that gives the inspiration. And I always say that, you know, whenever in any situation our women are, you know what they say, one thing which I have learned from them is our courage is our capital. That is one.
I think what I feel is, you know, there's always that judgment against women in terms of a perception that's set. कि if you're in sports, क्या आपको stats पता है, क्या आपको game पता है, क्या इनको rules पता है. That happens, that still happens, and when you're sort of in the sports field negotiating or sitting across the table, you'd possibly be the only person across, say, 10 gentlemen who would be on that board. But the good thing is things are changing. Now we have the leadership roles in terms of the IOA president who's a woman. We're getting more athletes, some leadership positions. Hopefully it leads to far more women representing India at leadership places. But one thing is, I always believe that you should let your work do the talking, because jitna bhi log bolte rahenge, once they see your work, everything else is going to stop. So that's been my strategy ki, जैसे क्रिकेट में बोलता है जब तक बल्ला है तब तक ठाठ है. सो आई ऑलवेज बिलीव कि यू नो लेट योर वर्क डू द टॉकिंग.
Okay. Thank you, girls, women, for those wonderful stories and for just bringing up
building solutions
all the
locally.
important things we're talking about. Courage,
Encourage is
resilience, change, despair, you know, so much
Background.
Inspiration and so on. We are going to open it up now for questions. So if any of you has questions,
Risks.
there
How
are
do
2
you-
hands raised here. Just if you can keep them brief.
Hi, my question is for Harini.
And
I'm a podcast host on Sporting Memories, so a lot of what you said resonated. My question is, what about reporting around female sport would you like to see change, and why do you think that change is important?
Okay, don't answer it just now. So what about reporting about female sport would you like to see changed and why? But hold on, let's take a few more questions, yeah? Yes.
Hi, my name is Aditi, and my question is about this notion of women being the worst enemies. Now, when a woman who is empowered, who is strong, educated, has this notion because of the narrative that she has been fed over the years, how does that change? Because she's doing everything, but she somehow internalized that notion. So how does that change happen? How do we bring that?
Okay, one more question here in front, and then we'll take a round of answers, and then we'll take another round of questions.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Nidhi, and my question is for Chetna, ma'am. I represent a very small organization which works with community radios in Uttarakhand, and where, you know, in the 6 or 7 stations that we work with, 60 to 70% of the workforce is women, much like you pointed out. And these are women, you know, who've even traveled to South Hall, and then they've shared their plight, etc., etc. And yet, you know, when we ask them, and at the helm is a station manager, And when we ask them that please come and speak at the World Congress on Disaster, they say कि गायें कौन देखेगा, and you know मैं एक पंचायत में कैसे बोलूँ क्योंकि मेरे ससुर जी बैठे हुए हैं वहाँ पे. So these and these are the same sets of women. How do we overcome this, and what is like the way out for both Chetna ma'am and Kanta? Thank you.
Thank you. Respond to the question.
Should I start?
Yeah. Harini, please go.
Okay, sorry, forgot your name. What's your name? Hi, Puruja. So I think in terms of what change I would like to see is definitely more girls taking up sport as a serious profession, because beyond being an athlete also you can contribute to the ecosystem and you can be a powerful voice. So that's something that everybody needs to know. In terms of what change can we make in the reportage, we are seeing that change happening where, you know, if you look at our Indian Olympics contingent, last year we had majority of the contingent was women, right? Which has not happened in so many years since we've been participating in Olympics. So that's happening, which is also translating into more stories being covered of those athletes, their back journey is being covered, their parents' back journey is being covered. So I think that ways we're progressing in the right way. But we need more platforms and we need more mainstream media to actually be focusing on stories which might not be glamorous, which might not get us the mullah in terms of the sponsorship, in terms of you know, different brands coming on board. But especially with digital platforms, I think that also has a huge potential where, you know, for example, the podcast that you're talking about, it also has a huge potential to capture the stories and put it across for people to consume, because that's how the Gen Z or the newer generation is consuming content. So I think just largely amplifying those stories and making them reach to a larger audience becomes our responsibility as media professions. And as you mentioned, like what more for journalists, I think, you know, if there's anything that you would want to know or anybody else, I'm more than happy to sort of be a mentor or just, you know, guide you if there is anything that you guys have queries for. So you can always DM me. That's Harini Rana on Instagram, Twitter as well.
On how to change the narrative for women are women's worst enemies, we need to demystify this very simply in whichever setting you are in. One, at home, definitely माँ नसास जो है वो बहू की दुश्मन है. We need to change that narrative because that's not true. It is the power that women, both of them, are trying to get attention of the son and the husband, who is the same person who holds power within the family. It is related to that. So that is number one. Also, I think it's kind of a politics, Urvashi ji, that people talk about this whole thing. I think हमें बहकाया गया है ये कह के और हम उस पर विश्वास करने लगे हैं. उसको चेंज करने के लिए हमें फिर से उसको रीराइट, रीस्टेट, रीटेल, वो एक सिस्टम शुरू करने की ज़रूरत है जहाँ पे हम डेमॉन्स्ट्रेट करें कि ऐसा नहीं है, हम साथ में हैं, हम कहाँ दुश्मनी पाल रहे हैं एक दूसरे को. बट द वर्स्ट पार्ट इज़ दैट when we start saying it ourselves, let's not say it ourselves. Let's demonstrate that we are not and support each other in public discourse. Also in a personal life, support your sister-in-law instead of unse compete karne ki bajaye. I think we individually need to do that, but also wherever we write, speak, represent, we change that narrative and demystify that and not play that game of power with any man. Just a simple example, Urvashi ji, that जब वो कहते हैं कि मेरी माँ लेके गई थी इसका तो सेक्स सिलेक्शन कराने के लिए जो अबॉर्शन होता है, मुझे तो पता ही नहीं क्या हुआ. बट आस्क हिम, क्या तुम वो पिक्चर देखने जा सकती है तुम्हारे पूछे बिना? वो कहेगा नहीं. मायके जा सकती है? नहीं. तो वो 5,000 रुपये दे के और वो अल्ट्रासाउंड करा के तेरे बच्चे का अबॉर्शन करा के, डू यू थिंक इट्स हैपनिंग विदाउट योर कंसेंट? नो, इट्स नॉट. But he plays to be quiet there. He doesn't play a role because वो पाप भी सर नहीं लेना चाहता और माँ को और बहू का दुश्मन भी बना देता. Let's not play that game with them. Just break that cycle.
Yeah. Just like about your question, I just would like to say that, you know what, women really have lot of work because they do everything, right? So the first would be that, of course, our challenge is that how do we share the work? But another thing which I feel is very important is that when you are working with these women who are doing 24/7 work, when they are coming with you, celebrate them. They should get the pride They should be considered as a heroes. And how do you do that? As you mentioned, that tell their story in newspaper, interview them on the radio, get them on the TV, get them their cutouts on the board instead of all other cutouts are happening, whatever, जिसको देखना भी अच्छा नहीं लगता है. Right? But if we get these women's stories on the big cutout, then other women will feel, even her mother-in-law will feel that my daughter-in-law is such an important personality. So she needs to get. So I think respect, dignify, and make it public and celebrate them. I think that is very important.
Okay, thank you, Chetna. Okay.
I just wanted to bring to your notice that the laws themselves are very regressive. I mean, talking about Uttarakhand, do you know that women are not allowed to inherit land, which is their father's land, and it goes only to men. So, I mean, that's the basic genesis of all that which is happening. And, I mean, the agricultural laws are so regressive. I mean, why don't we just start from there, and that's the mindset. Even the laws need to change.
Okay, thank you. We've got 1 minute and 43 seconds. Is there anyone else who's dying to ask a question? I can see a hand. Can you stand up, please? So I can see you and just quickly ask your question. I can't guarantee we'll find an answer, but...
So my question is, within each of your professions, have you seen a direct policy or state governance
DSA, not DSA, daily allowance. But after 20 years, the state government invited us to honor us, basically. And again, the same thing happened with the current team. They announced 50% prize money and 50% that. And all of us, without talking to each other, old friends and old colleagues, got up and raised a big hala in the stadium saying this is not acceptable. I'm talking about 2002, Haryana government then invited us, they of course corrected that, but invited us to write the sports policy. What you see today in Haryana is a result of that. Government jobs, cash prize, it happens if you raise your voice. Last thing, Urvashi ji, when you see the courage comes when you see girls in Iran talking about their rights, when you see women in Afghanistan still trying to study. I think all of us have a reason not to get into despair and think that we are going to change the world ourselves.